It's my pleasure to welcome back Gary Batey, and I read in his bio that he and his wife Karen are celebrating 50 years together, 50 years of marriage. Congratulations. I'm sure you've been a light and an inspiration and a comfort to each other for so many of those years, and thank you for coming and sharing with us. And now to shed some light for us, with his sermon, Do You See What I See? Help me welcome Gary Batey.
Thank you very much. Always a joy to be here with you. And over the times that I have been here, I am seeing growth and life in your fellowship. It's exciting for me to see. I hope you can see it. I can see it. Probably it's like being, well, I don't feel like a grandfather to you, but I am a grandfather, and we have grandchildren out in Oregon, so we see them, only periodically, and we notice the growth in so many ways that probably isn't as apparent to everyone who's with them every day. But being with you only periodically, I can see it. I can feel it. I hope you can as well. Well, in the Christian community, this is now the season of Epiphany. Yesterday was Epiphany Day. It comes at the end of the Christmas season, which for the churches that follow a Christian calendar really extends beyond Christmas Day. It really begins with Christmas Day. In our culture, of course, everything of Christmas starts about Halloween, and then by Christmas it's done. But in the tradition, and in the at least the churches that observe that calendar, there are 12 days of Christmas, and that's why we got that sort of annoying song, about 12 drummers drumming and 11 pipers piping, and 10 lords a-leaping, 9 ladies dancing, 8 maids a-milking, 7 swans a-swimming, 6 geese a-laying, 5 golden, 4 calling birds, 3 French hens, 2 turtle doves, and a partridge in a pear tree. And then, when that's over, the night before Epiphany, there is Twelfth Night. Many of you who are Shakespeare fans know that there's a play by that title, and that's what the 12th night is. It's the last night of Christmas season. And then the next day is Epiphany. It's the day that teenage boys in Tarpon Springs all dive for a cross in water that none of us would go into. It's a day, to be pleased you're not Greek Orthodox or a teenager. But someone, as always, lots of boys there, and glad to do it, and they are welcome to it. For me, if it's not at least 82, I'm not going in. But are any of you, well, you're from Minnesota, but for goodness sake. Yeah, you've probably been in the Gulf 6 or 8 times since you got here. This is, no, you haven't? Yeah, we live in a condo, and there are people who come down from Michigan, and they're in the pool all the time. But no, I think I'll pass on that. Epiphany is one of those Greek-based words the church uses. It's got a very rich meaning, but I think one of the meanings of it, the thing that would kind of attach to all of us, is, aha! Oh, I see it. Yes. Now I understand. Or if I don't comprehend completely, at least now I'm aware. You got my attention. Some people have just an innate sense. Some people are are looking for that moment of aha, that moment of, I see it, I understand. That's the story, probably legendary, of the wise men, the magi, who, and that probably means astrologers, people who were sort of combination of the best astronomers they had at that time, and people who believed that things in the stars were telling us about the significance of what's going on now or what's about to happen. And I know there are still people who follow astrology. Nonetheless, those guys, according to the story, went looking for something, or really went looking for someone, and when they encountered Jesus, so the story goes, they said, aha, this is it. A terrible story that is in Matthew's Gospel about King Herod, and the way that King Herod heard the news, he took it as, hey, wait a minute. There's somebody who is crowding in on my position, on my privilege, on my power. And he didn't like it. And the way that story goes, he sent soldiers out to kill all the children in the neighborhood who might be a threat to what he saw as his rightful place and his rightful power to acquire and to hold. I can't imagine a leader with that kind of attitude, can you? Oh, you can. Well, and what Herod did, killing off the children because they were a threat, because they were an encumbrance, because they stood in the way of his power and wealth and position, still goes on today. Oh, maybe not sending out soldiers with swords, but finding ways to deny opportunities for other people's children to enjoy the health, the welfare, the blessings that those who are at the top of the heap take for granted as their special privilege. And we're seeing too much of that, you know that. We're seeing it in the way people are treated and mistreated. Not only on an individual level, man, have people become nasty to each other. And on an institutional level, where in order to stay in power, to stay in office, people who've been entrusted with leadership of the nations, not just this one, but others, seem to go out of their way to inflict pain and suffering and shackles of all descriptions on people who they feel might be an encumbrance or a threat to what they believe to be their rightful position in the world. Things haven't changed much. And of course, there's a feeling that can come out of that of darkness and despair. And that's the time when aha needs to happen. When in the midst of all the darkness, all of the depressing and frustrating things that either make you go, ah, or yuck, to have that moment of, oh, aha, there is some light in the darkness. In the biblical tradition, there are all sorts of places where people in kind of a rough spot suddenly have an awareness that whatever is eternal, whatever is transcendent, whatever is holy, whatever is far beyond the grasp of our intellect or even of our emotions. But whatever that is, I would call that God. You might have another name. Certainly people in other religious traditions and philosophical traditions have their own term for it. But there is that moment when an inbreaking of that glory and majesty and truly awesome power and light is suddenly present. Or maybe it's not suddenly present, but suddenly we're aware of it. And over again, in the experience of the people who were behind the writing of the Bible, there were those times when someone was hard-pressed and feeling helpless and hopeless, and they suddenly encountered that which is beyond ourselves. That moment of incredible connection and awareness that gave them new life, new hope, new joy, new power and possibility. And maybe what they were discovering was just something that was already in them, buried or hidden. And maybe it was something whose seeds had been planted a long time before, and then it just began to sprout. If you've ever done any gardening, you know how that is. And you put seed in the ground. And then through that power that is life, it suddenly, boing, comes up through the earth. Those are those holy moments. As it's described in some of the biblical stories, maybe one of the best ones that you've at least heard of is Moses at a burning bush, who realizes, I'm on holy ground. Jacob, who had that dream, and suddenly, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Unpacking those words a little bit, to say, this place I am right now is a holy place, and I didn't realize it. I think it's the realization more than a particular spot being holy. One of the great biblical stories, it's a story from the Exodus tradition, and it talks about the people who are coming out of bondage, heading to a place of promise, not knowing exactly where it is, and in some ways frightened by what they face in the wilderness, and fearing an army that's coming behind them to get them. they were guided by a pillar of fire. And the way the story is told, probably not exactly the way it happened. We have, from the movies, this idea that they all just lined up in an orderly fashion and marched on to the promised land. It always reminds me, and I was reminded of this again when we were talking about experiences with ministers. I was in a minister's choir many years ago, and we would travel around to churches and sing. We'd sing a set of songs, and then we'd walk out for a brief intermission, and then we would come back in, get on the risers, and sing some more. We were in a church in Pennsylvania, can't remember which town in Pennsylvania now, and we did the first half of our concert, and then we all marched in a wonderful line into what we didn't know, but they all knew, was a big closet. And so we, it's where they stored the tables and chairs, I guess. But, so we walked right into it, this whole line of us. And so we're standing there, and they're saying, what should we do? And I said, well, they all know we're in a closet. This is no secret. We have already made fools of ourselves. We might as well just walk out and head to the fellowship hall where we were supposed to be. And so anyhow, we who were marching, following a leader who didn't know where he was going. But interestingly enough, we got the biggest round of applause for just coming out of the closet. And a lot of people don't get a big round of applause for coming out of the closet. So, we were fortunate in that respect. But in this story of the Exodus, the way it's told and the way it's shown in the movies, all these people standing in a line, and I like that image because I know if you had all those people standing in a line, there were some people in the line who couldn't see the pillar of fire. They weren't actually following the light. They were trying to follow people who could see the light. And this happens a lot in life. When your flame fizzles, when the glow is gone, when the inspiration just isn't there, when the darkness seems to overwhelm, you can see someone who does see the light. Even better, you can see someone who has the light. Can you think of some places that you're seeing just a spark of light in the darkness? The horrible things we've heard that led to the Me Too movement, that's light in what had been dark and hidden. And it shined the light on things we'd rather not have seen, because we'd rather they hadn't been there. And to some extent, we may even be saying, oh, I wish this had all been kept quiet. And having worked for several years in helping for the recovery of people who had been abused, and of also of those who were offenders, I can tell you that it's going on more than you think, in more places than you'd want to believe. And every time someone speaks up, there's light in the darkness. And even if it's painful to see what's happened, it's better because of those who have the light, who get that sudden spark of courage or whatever it is that allows them to do that. And we've seen it with those who have stood up in resistance to oppressive or destructive movements within their own society. It's happened here, happened in other countries. Not always successful, because the dark forces are powerful. And yet, as long as anyone has the light, the darkness doesn't win. Do you know how important this symbol is? It's something you do as a part of your worship service, and it becomes kind of institutionalized, and it may become just sort of, okay, this is how we start. But this means something. This means we have seen light, and we have been given light. And if one or two or three of us don't have it at the moment, as long as there are any of us who still have it and see it and show it, the darkness hasn't won. And this is a symbol of that. It's a symbol of other things too, but when you see it, see that. No matter how dark the day, the light is still shining. And do you see it? Do you see it in others? Do you see it in yourself? You were talking about the feeling at the time of a birth. You weren't just talking about it. You were feeling it again. We could see that. It was there. I've had the same experience. People talked a lot about the miraculous birth of Jesus. Has there ever been a birth that wasn't miraculous? Has there ever been a child who wasn't a gift of God to the world? Has there ever been a baby in any country, or a toddler, or a school child, or a teenager, or a young adult, or someone elderly, the infirm, the handicapped? Is there any that isn't a miracle? It isn't precious? Do you see that light? And if you see it, what are you going to do with it? That's the question for us all, isn't it? Where and how are you going to let your light shine so that no one can ever put it out? The light shines in the darkness, and you are the light. That's where it is. If it's anywhere, it's in us. Do you see it? I see it. See it in you. I see some in myself. I see it all around. And while I'd love to join in with all those who just want to yell, "Ain't it awful?" And there's a reason to do that. But I still want to say, there's light here and there. Don't let it go out. Don't lose sight of it. And make sure that others see it in you.